The Kitchen Tyrant. The kitchen of Aria was Marco Valentini's battlefield. Steam billowed from pots, knives flashed against cutting boards, and at the center of it all, Marco moved with calculated precision, his dark eyes scanning each plate with the scrutiny of a general inspecting his troops. "This risotto is undercooked," he announced, pushing the plate away. "And where's the truffle oil on this carpaccio? Do it again!" His voice never rose above a controlled tenor, but it didn't need to. Everyone in the kitchen felt its sting. At 40, Marco had amassed what most chefs only dreamed of: 2 Michelin stars, a restaurant empire spanning Chicago's Gold Coast, and a reputation that made both critics and competitors tremble. Aria was his crown jewel, a temple to modernist cuisine where reservations were secured months in advance and bills routinely exceeded 4 figures. Across town, in a modest apartment filled with the aroma of ginger and garlic, Sophia Chen carefully packed her knife roll. At 32, she had spent the last decade cooking in small family restaurants and neighborhood bistros. Her resume was respectable but lacked prestige, nothing like the culinary elite now expecting her arrival. "You sure about this?" her roommate Jade asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I heard he made a line cook cry last week." Sophia smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "I need the experience. And the money." She didn't mention the medical bills stacking up for her father back in San Francisco, or how his small restaurant, once the pride of Chinatown, had closed last year. Another casualty of rising rents and changing neighborhoods. When Sophia arrived at Aria, the hostility was immediate. Marco's sous chef, Daniel, barely acknowledged her as he thrust a starched white jacket into her hands. "You're on cold apps. Don't speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, move faster than you're moving right now." The kitchen was a ballet of controlled chaos, everyone moving with purpose and precision. Sophia fell into rhythm quickly, her hands steady as she assembled delicate amuse-bouches and intricate salads. But when lunch service ended, she retreated to a quiet corner to eat the simple rice bowl she'd brought from home. Marco noticed her immediately. Those humble containers an affront to the gastronomic temple he'd built. "What is that?" he asked, his Italian accent thickening with disdain. Sophia looked up. "Congee? Rice porridge with century egg and pork floss." He arched an eyebrow. "You work in one of Chicago's finest restaurants, and you bring porridge?" "It reminds me of home," she replied simply, neither intimidated nor apologetic. Something flickered across Marco's face, irritation perhaps, or confusion at her lack of deference. "Well, keep it out of sight. We have standards here." That evening, as service reached its peak, disaster struck. A server collided with a line cook, sending a tray of scallops crashing to the floor. Scallops meant for the mayor's table, where 6 guests were already enjoying their appetizers. "How long for a refire?" Marco demanded, his composure slipping. 15 minutes minimum, Daniel answered. "We're out of prepped scallops." Marco's face darkened. His reputation, his perfect record, all in jeopardy because of carelessness. His gaze fell on Sophia, calmly preparing a salad nearby. "You!" he called. "New girl. We need something for the mayor's table, now." Sophia looked up, her dark eyes meeting his. In that moment, everything in the kitchen seemed to still, waiting for her response. "I have an idea," she said quietly. "Give me 7 minutes." A dish of memories. 7 minutes. The ticking clock might as well have been a countdown to execution in Marco's kitchen. The mayor's table couldn't wait, and Marco's jaw tightened as he watched Sophia move with quiet determination. Unlike the frantic energy that usually permeated Aria's kitchen, her movements were graceful, almost meditative. She reached for ingredients others might overlook. Day-old bread from the morning's service, tomatoes deemed too imperfect for Aria's presentations, herbs from the garnish station. With practiced hands, she toasted the bread with garlic, pureed the tomatoes with olive oil, and added a handful of fresh herbs. "What are you making?" Daniel whispered, hovering nearby. "Panzanella," Sophia answered simply. "Tuscan bread salad," Marco scoffed from across the kitchen. "You're serving the mayor of Chicago peasant food?" Sophia didn't respond, focusing instead on her plating. The dish was humble, Rustic cubes of toasted bread tossed with vibrant tomatoes, thin ribbons of basil, and shavings of aged Parmesan. But she arranged it with the same care one might give to a work of art, finishing each plate with a drizzle of 30-year balsamic vinegar she'd found tucked away on a back shelf. "This is ridiculous," Marco muttered. But with no time for alternatives, he nodded to the server. "Take it." In the dining room, the mayor's table fell silent as the unexpected dish arrived. Marco watched through the kitchen window, his stomach knotting with anticipated humiliation. But then something extraordinary happened. The mayor took a bite and closed her eyes. When she opened them, she beckoned the maître d'. 5 minutes later, the maître d' returned to the kitchen, his expression one of disbelief. "They're asking for the chef who made the panzanella. The mayor says it's the most authentic she's tasted since her grandmother's in Florence." All eyes turned to Sophia, who blushed under the attention. Marco stepped forward, his pride warring with curiosity. "I'll go," he said firmly. But as he reached the door, he paused. "Bring her too." At the table, the mayor, an imposing woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, greeted them warmly. "This dish," she said, gesturing to her now empty plate, "transported me back to summers in Tuscany with my nonna." "Who is responsible?" Marco hesitated, then stepped aside. "My new chef, Sophia Chen." The mayor raised her eyebrows. "A Chinese woman making the best Italian panzanella in Chicago? Remarkable." "My father taught me that good food isn't about nationality. It's about heart," Sophia replied softly. "He believed that every culture understands the same fundamental truth. Food made with love nourishes more than the body." The mayor nodded, clearly moved. "Your father must be an exceptional chef." "He was," Sophia said, a shadow crossing her face. Later, after service ended and the kitchen fell quiet, Marco found Sophia cleaning her station. The question had been burning in him all evening. "Where did you learn to cook like that?" he asked, his usual arrogance tempered by genuine curiosity. Sophia looked up, her hands pausing mid-task. "My father's restaurant, Golden Phoenix in San Francisco's Chinatown. For 30 years, he served both Chinese and Western comfort food, whatever made people happy." "I've never heard of it." "You wouldn't have," she said, a hint of bitterness entering her voice. "It wasn't famous or trendy, just beloved by the neighborhood." Marco leaned against the counter. "And what happened to it?" Something flashed in Sophia's eyes. "Vesuvio Restaurant Group bought the building last year, tripled the rent, said they were revitalizing the neighborhood." She resumed cleaning, her movements suddenly brisker. 3 months after we closed, my father had a stroke. He's in assisted living now." The name hit Marco like a physical blow. Vesuvio Group, his restaurant group, the conglomerate that had approached him 5 years ago with promises of expansion and empire building. He had signed the contracts, appeared in the press releases, celebrated each new acquisition without ever considering the human cost. "Sophia, he began, but she cut him off with a raised hand. "It's late, Chef. I should go." As she walked away, Marco remained frozen, the realization dawning that the empire he'd built may have been constructed on the ruins of places like Golden Phoenix. Restaurants with soul, with history, with heart. That night, for the first time in years, Marco couldn't sleep. He found himself in Aria's kitchen at 4 a.m., attempting to recreate Sophia's panzanella. Despite following what he'd observed, something was missing. The flavor was correct, the texture perfect, but it lacked something indefinable. By morning, he had made a decision. When Sophia arrived, he was waiting. "I want you to teach me," he said without preamble. "Not techniques, I have those. I want you to show me what your father knew, what you know. How to make food that makes people feel." Sophia studied him, her expression unreadable. "Why should I help you?" Marco hesitated, then spoke the truth that had kept him awake. "Because I think I've forgotten why I became a chef in the first place." Bitter truths. The revelation hit like a thunderclap in Aria's hushed dining room. It was after hours, and Marco sat across from Sophia, the truth between them as tangible as the untouched glasses of wine. "I didn't know," Marco said, rubbing his temples. "I sign papers, I make appearances, but the real estate decisions, He trailed off, aware of how hollow his excuses sounded. "Does it matter?" Sophia asked, her voice quiet but firm. "Whether you signed the eviction notice personally or not, you're the face of Vesuvio. You profit from what happened to Golden Phoenix and dozens of other family businesses." Marco had spent the afternoon researching his own company's acquisitions, horrified to discover a pattern. Beloved local establishments replaced by upscale boutiques and trendy eateries bearing his name or those of other celebrity chefs. His success had been built on displacement. "I want to make it right," he said finally. Sophia laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "How? My father's health is failing. His legacy is gone. The community that depended on our restaurant has scattered." "I can help with your father's medical bills," Marco offered. "I don't want your money," she replied, standing abruptly. "I want my father's restaurant back. I want his dignity back. But since that's impossible, I'll settle for doing my job here until I find something better." The tension between them continued for days. In the kitchen, they moved around each other like cautious dancers, professional but distant. Yet something was changing at Aria. Marco had asked Sophia to introduce one memory dish to the staff meal each day, humble food that told a story. First came her father's pot stickers, the dough rolled by hand and filled with a fragrant mixture of pork, cabbage, and ginger. Then oxtail soup that had simmered for hours, rich with star anise and cinnamon. Each dish came with a story. How her grandmother had saved these recipes during China's Cultural Revolution. How her father had adapted them in America. How food had preserved their family's history when nothing else could. The staff, initially skeptical, began to look forward to these meals. Marco watched as his militaristic kitchen softened slightly, as cooks lingered over lunch and shared stories of their own family dishes. One evening, as service wound down, Marco approached Sophia. "Tomorrow's my day off. Come with me." "Where?" she asked, suspicion evident in her voice. "To meet someone who might help us both understand something important." The next day, they drove to a small apartment in Pilsen. Marco knocked on the door, and it was opened by an elderly Italian woman who engulfed him in a hug. "Nonna," he said, switching to Italian as he introduced Sophia. Marco's grandmother, Maria, welcomed them into a tiny kitchen that smelled of tomatoes and basil. Photos covered the walls, younger versions of Maria standing proudly before a small storefront restaurant. "Valentini's," Marco explained to Sophia. "My grandparents' place. It closed 20 years ago when the neighborhood changed and they couldn't keep up with the new rent." Understanding dawned on Sophia's face. "You were displaced too." Maria served them espresso and homemade biscotti. "Marco was 14 when we closed," she said in accented English. "He would come every day after school to help his grandfather cook. When we lost the restaurant, something in him changed. He became determined, obsessed with success. I wanted to build something they couldn't take away," Marco admitted. "Something too important, too prestigious to be pushed aside." "And in doing so," Sophia said softly, "you became the very force that pushed others aside." Marco nodded, the irony not lost on him. "I didn't see it until now." As they helped Maria prepare Sunday gravy, a rich tomato sauce with meatballs, sausage, and pork ribs that would simmer all day, Marco and Sophia worked side by side. Their hands occasionally brushed, and Marco noticed how Sophia no longer flinched at the contact. When she laughed at his clumsy attempt to roll meatballs to Maria's exacting standards, something warm bloomed in his chest. Later, as they sat down to eat, Maria placed an old notebook on the table. "These are our family recipes," she told Sophia. Marco never wanted them. "Said they were too simple for a chef of his caliber." Sophia opened it carefully, treating the stained pages with reverence. "They're beautiful," she murmured, tracing the handwritten instructions. When their eyes met across the table, something unspoken passed between them, recognition perhaps of a shared understanding. Both had lost something precious. Both carried the weight of family legacies, and both understood how food could be an act of preservation, of memory, of love. As they drove back to the city, Marco broke the comfortable silence. I have an idea. Something that might honor both our families. He hesitated. Would you be willing to work with me on something new? Sophia gazed out at the Chicago skyline glittering against the darkening sky. I'm listening. Simmering tension. The transformation of Aria began quietly. Small changes at first. A family-style Sunday supper option. A revised staff meal that became the highlight of the day. Subtle alterations to the tasting menu that incorporated techniques Sophia had learned from her father. Marco and Sophia worked late into the nights, their initial hostility melting into a collaborative rhythm that surprised them both. What if we add fermented black beans to the jus? Sophia suggested one evening, leaning over a pot that Marco was stirring. Just a hint. It would add depth without overwhelming the venison. Marco raised an eyebrow but nodded. Show me. Watching her work, Marco was struck by how differently they approached cooking. Where he pursued technical perfection, Sophia cooked with intuition. Where he commanded, she suggested. Their styles should have clashed, but instead they complemented each other in unexpected ways. The critics noticed. Aria has evolved, wrote one influential reviewer. Valentini's technical brilliance now carries an emotional resonance previously missing from his work. Each dish tells a story, of heritage, of memory, of connection. Reservations, already difficult to secure, became nearly impossible. Regulars commented on the change, many praising the new direction. But not everyone was pleased. What exactly is happening here? Victor Blackwood, the majority investor in Vesuvio Restaurant Group, arrived unannounced one afternoon, his tailored suit as sharp as his tone. He held up the new menu. Tuscan bread salad. Family-style dining options. This isn't what Aria represents. Marco straightened, instinctively moving to stand between Victor and Sophia, who was prepping nearby. It's evolution, Victor. The restaurant needed it. Victor's eyes narrowed as they landed on Sophia. And this is your inspiration? Some unknown chef making peasant food? This is Sophia Chen, Marco said coolly. And her peasant food, as you call it, has increased our bookings by 30%. The novelty will wear off, Victor dismissed with a wave of his hand. He lowered his voice, though not enough to prevent Sophia from hearing. You've built a brand, Marco. Precise, exclusive, elite. This homey comfort food trend undermines everything we've established. Later, after Victor had departed with thinly veiled threats about board meetings and contract reviews, Sophia confronted Marco in his office. He's right about one thing, she said, arms crossed. This isn't what Aria was built to be. Marco sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. Aria was built to be whatever I wanted it to be, and now I want something different. At what cost? Sophia pressed. Your investors are ready to revolt. Your reputation— My reputation, Marco interrupted, standing to face her, was built on food that impressed but never moved, on restaurants that looked perfect but felt empty. He stepped closer, his voice softening. You've shown me another way. The air between them changed, charged suddenly with something neither had acknowledged. Sophia became aware of his proximity, of the faint scent of rosemary and lemon that clung to him, of how his eyes, usually so calculating, now held something warmer. Marco, she began, uncertain. The moment shattered as Daniel burst into the office. Chef, there's an issue with the wine delivery. The spell broken, Sophia stepped back, smoothing her apron with trembling hands. I should finish prep, she murmured, slipping past Daniel and out the door. That night's service was flawless, but the tension between Marco and Sophia was palpable. They moved around each other with careful distance, their usual synchronicity disrupted by the almost moment in his office. As they closed the kitchen, Marco found himself watching her. The precise way she wiped down her station, the gentle authority she showed when helping younger cooks, the small smile that appeared when she tasted something that pleased her. Something had shifted in him, a recognition he couldn't ignore. When everyone else had gone, he approached her. Walk with me? Chicago at midnight was hushed, the streets of the Gold Coast nearly empty as they strolled past darkened storefronts. They talked about inconsequential things, a new supplier of heritage pork, plans to expand the herb garden on Aria's roof, carefully avoiding the undercurrent between them. They paused at a small park, sitting on a bench beneath flowering cherry trees. In the gentle moonlight, Marco finally spoke the truth. "I've been thinking about what Victor said," he began. "About the restaurant's direction." Sophia tensed beside him. "And?" The perfect blend. The ultimatum hung in the air of Aria's empty dining room, where Victor had arranged an emergency board meeting. Marco's face was a study in controlled rage as he stared down the investors who had helped build his empire. "Let me understand this," Marco said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You're threatening to destroy a family's legacy unless I fire Sophia and abandon our new direction?" Victor shrugged, unrepentant. "Business is business, Marco. Sentimentality is a luxury we can't afford. The Valentini brand stands for exclusivity, not nostalgia." Sophia stood very still, her mind racing. The Golden Phoenix location, her family's heart and soul for 3 decades, would become another soulless chain restaurant. Her father would never recover from such a blow. "I'll go," she said suddenly. All eyes turned to her. "I'll resign, just leave Golden Phoenix alone." Marco shook his head. "No, this isn't your decision to make." "Actually," she countered, "it is. This is my family's legacy we're talking about. And this," Marco gestured around the restaurant, "is mine." He turned to face Victor. "You think you understand what the Valentini brand represents, but you don't. It wasn't built on exclusivity. It was built on excellence, on passion, on creating food that matters." Victor checked his watch, unmoved. "Very inspiring, but unless you have the capital to buy us out, which, according to our financial team, you don't, these speeches won't change the board's position." Marco's jaw tightened. He looked at Sophia, an unspoken question in his eyes. She gave a small nod, a gesture of trust. "What if," Marco said carefully, "I could prove that our new direction isn't just creatively successful, but financially viable beyond anything Aria has done before?" Victor laughed. "How exactly would you do that? Your little experiment has barely begun. Give us 1 month," Marco proposed. "One event. If we can't demonstrate that this new vision has greater potential than the old Aria, I'll step back. Sophia will leave. You can have your precious brand back." The board members exchanged glances. Finally, Victor nodded. 1 month. 1 event. But when you fail, and you will, Ms. Chen not only leaves, but signs a non-compete covering all major restaurant markets in the country. Sophia gasped. "That would end my career." "That's the price of playing with the big boys," Victor replied coldly. After they left, Sophia confronted Marco in the kitchen. "How could you agree to those terms?" "My entire future is at stake." Marco took her hands in his. "I know what I'm doing. Trust me. Trust you." She pulled away. "This is exactly the kind of high-handed decision-making that built your empire on the backs of places like Golden Phoenix." The hurt in his eyes was genuine. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Sophia grabbed her bag. "I need time to think." For 3 days, Sophia didn't return to Aria. She spent hours walking San Francisco's Chinatown streets, sitting in her father's room at the care facility, and thinking about choices and consequences. On the 4th day, she found Marco waiting outside her apartment building, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "I went to San Francisco," he said without preamble. "I saw the Golden Phoenix location. I met your father." Sophia stiffened. "You had no right." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair. "But I needed to understand." "And your father." He helped me see something important. Despite herself, Sophia was curious. "What? That legacy isn't about buildings or brands. It's about the people you touch with what you create." He stepped closer. He showed me photos of Golden Phoenix, the celebrations, the regular customers who became family. He told me how you would sit at the counter after school doing homework while he taught you to fold dumplings. Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes. "He remembers that?" Marco nodded. "He also told me I was an idiot if I let you walk away." A small smile played at his lips. "His words, not mine." Despite herself, Sophia laughed. "That sounds like him." "I have a plan," Marco said. "A real one, not just a desperate play for time. But it only works if we do it together." 1 month later, Chicago's culinary elite, food critics, and the entire Vesuvio board gathered for what had been billed as an evening of convergence at Aria. The restaurant had been transformed. The typically austere dining room now featured family-style tables, vintage photos from both Valentini's and Golden Phoenix adorning the walls, and an open kitchen where Marco and Sofia worked side by side. The menu told a story, not of fusion, but of parallel journeys. Italian ribollita soup served alongside Chinese congee, hand-pulled noodles prepared two ways, one with classic bolognese, the other with spicy Sichuan peppercorns. Each dish honored its cultural roots while finding surprising points of connection. As the final course was served, a delicate panna cotta infused with 5-spice and topped with candied kumquat. Marco stepped into the dining room. Sofia followed, nervous but resolute. Tonight, Marco addressed the room, is about more than food. It's about heritage, community, and the future of dining. He unveiled their plan. Not just a reimagined Aria, but a new venture altogether. A cooking school that would provide free culinary education to families displaced by gentrification. A restaurant incubator that would help small, family-owned establishments survive in changing neighborhoods. And a foundation, funded by a percentage of all Vesuvio profits, dedicated to preserving culinary heritage across cultures. This isn't charity, Marco explained. It's sound business. When we protect diversity in our food scene, everyone benefits, including the high-end establishments that draw inspiration from these traditions. The financial projections, presented by a team of respected consultants, showed how the new direction would generate more sustainable growth than the previous model. How authenticity, when properly valued, could be more profitable than exclusivity. Victor looked stunned. Several board members were nodding thoughtfully. And seated at the center table was a surprise guest, Sofia's father, having made the journey from San Francisco with his nurse. His eyes shone with pride as he watched his daughter standing confidently beside Marco. As the evening concluded, investors and critics alike approached them, excited by the vision. Even Victor, though grudging, acknowledged that the numbers were compelling. "You've won this round," he told Marco quietly, "but the board will be watching closely." "Let them watch," Marco replied. "What we're building will be worth seeing." Later, in the quiet of the kitchen, Sofia and Marco stood amid the remnants of their triumph. Staff had gone home, dishes were cleaned, and the space held that particular silence that comes after a perfect service. "We did it," Sofia said softly, still processing the reality. Marco turned to her, his expression serious. "This is just the beginning. There's so much work ahead." "I know," she smiled. "I'm not afraid of work." "Good." He took her hands in his. "Because I want to build something lasting, something that honors both our pasts and creates a new future." His eyes held hers, vulnerable in a way the once arrogant chef never would have allowed. Not just professionally. Sofia stepped closer, wrapping her arms around his neck. "A perfect blend?" she suggested, something like that. Marco murmured before kissing her. A kiss that tasted of promises and possibilities. 3 months later, a small storefront in Chicago's West Loop bore a new sign, Golden Valentini's. Inside, tables filled with families, couples, and friends sharing dishes that crossed cultural boundaries while respecting traditions. In the open kitchen, Marco and Sofia moved in harmony, creating food that told their story, of arrogance humbled, of legacy honored, of love found in unexpected places, and at a special table near the window, Sofia's father sat with Marco's grandmother, trading stories of old restaurants and the children who had once stood at their sides, learning the truth that both had always known, that the most important ingredient in any dish is the love with which it is made.